Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining us today for our webinar, Proactively Engage Customers with Emergency Communications. My name is Bethany Farchione, and I'm from Questline Digital, and I am the host for today's event. Before we begin, we want to cover a few housekeeping items with you. If you have any questions during the webcast, you can submit them through the Q&A section, which is to the lower right of the presentation window. We will try to answer all questions during the webinar, but if a more in-depth answer is needed, or if we run out of time, we'll follow up with you over email. Some networks may cause slides to advance more slowly than others, so we recommend logging off your VPN. If your slides do fall behind, pushing F5 on your keyboard will refresh the page. And if you experience any other disruptions during the broadcast, please use the Q&A that I mentioned earlier, and we can work you through any technical issues. We will also be sending everyone a follow-up email, which will include a PDF of the PowerPoint presentation and a playback link to today's recording. We'll even be conducting poll questions during the presentation and would greatly appreciate your participation. The results of these polls can be viewed by accessing the Polls tab in the upper right-hand corner of your screen. There will also be a brief survey at the conclusion of the event, and we'll get to that a little bit later. Please be aware that you are not the only participant today. The names of other attendees are not being shown for your privacy. And now let's begin. Let me introduce our presenters today. We have Vonetta Burrell from Belize Electricity Limited and John Board from Tucson Electric Power. John is an accomplished subject matter expert with an extensive career history spearheading creation and execution of marketing research and customer experience strategies across multiple industries. He's focused on creating actionable research to maximize customer experience initiatives and brand management. He is passionate about driving customer value while achieving strategic business objectives and growth. John is currently Manager of Customer Experience at Tucson Electric Power and serves on the Chartwell Utility Advisory Board. Thanks for being with us, John. And Vonetta. Vonetta is the Manager of Corporate Communications at Belize Electricity Limited, with the responsibility to manage the company's overall corporate image, stakeholder relations, media relations, and community outreach. Vonetta is an advocate for using technology to engage consumers who have ever-changing interests and needs. She has been transforming Belize Electricity Limited's brand management and corporate communication culture to improve stakeholder engagement and relationship building. She holds a Master of Science in Integrated Marketing Communication from West Virginia University, has over 17 years of experience, and previously worked as an editor in radio and print media. In today's webinar, we'll hear from both John and Vonetta about their utility's focus on emergency outage communications and how they strategize these efforts. We'll then dive into a fireside chat. We'll do a Q&A and learn a little bit more. I've got tons of questions prepared, but please send in your questions to further the discussion. With that, I'll pass off to Vonetta so she can tell us more about emergency communications at Belize Electricity Limited.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining us today. So just to give an overview, of those of you who may not know where Belize is located in Central America. We are considered both Central American and Caribbean as a nation. Belize Electricity Limited is the primary distributor of electricity in Belize. We have a population of just over 400,000 and over 170,000 customer accounts that we serve, with a peak power demand of 103 megawatts annually. The majority of our power is sourced from renewable sources, about 53%. We import about 44% of our energy, and about 3% is from non-renewable sources, which is primarily diesel generation that's used for backup purposes and also to supply one community that's not connected to the national grid, and that's an island. What I will share today are primarily our tactics and strategies that we use to ensure that we are communicating effectively with our customer base especially during emergencies, including outages and other scenarios. So we will be covering how we ensure that we're using demographic-based notifications, what are the drivers for us to issue proactive notifications, the channels that we use to communicate with our audiences, how we ensure that our information flows in a timely manner, also how we notify customers during emergencies, and also the need for continuous assessment. That is to make sure that you continue to be effective and that you are evaluating the success of your communication efforts. So I mentioned demographics. Belize is a sparsely populated country. We have clusters of populations in urban areas and in rural areas. And we also have wide spans of lines to serve these customers. In addition to that, we have different types of cultures in the country, and our populations also have different types of access to technology and also our communication channels. That's important to note because what might work for one customer may not work for another. For example, in urban areas or areas where there is a lot of influx of people who have lived abroad or are more connected to technology, there are preferences for social media as a means of receiving information or communicating with us. Other areas we find are more effective to reach through radio because they don't necessarily have continuous access to the internet. And they also prefer to listen to the radio because of the lifestyles that they live. And in other areas, direct communication through SMS is also more effective. So these are things that we consider to ensure that we are reaching the right audience using the channels that are preferred by them. So how do we ensure that we are maintaining proactive notifications? First of all, we have to keep in mind our commitments to our customers and our commitments to our regulator. We are required to make sure that we are issuing notifications in a timely manner for outages, whether these are planned or unplanned or emergency scenarios. And as a company, we also have implemented our internal standards to ensure that we are holding ourselves at an even higher level in terms of timeliness of communication. So if we're required by the regulator to notify a certain group of customers because of the size of the population affected or the duration of the outage, we take it a little bit higher internally to make sure that we are meeting not just the minimal standard, but a higher standard. We also have in place a formal protocol that dictates what happens internally, what triggers a notification. Notifications are not only in the event of an unplanned outage, we also have planned works that require outages. Therefore, our teams who are organizing these works need to make sure that everyone internally is informed, understands the purpose of the outage, understands the type of customers affected, in order for us to streamline our efforts and to be as effective as possible. So our system control center triggers most of these notifications, whether it's planned or unplanned. For planned outages, they trigger the notification because they are the ones who have the final say in approving any outage. They are looking at all the measures that need to be taken into consideration, making sure that there are proper protections in place, making sure all the technical standards are met before an outage can proceed. And the approval time also determines how much time exists for us to inform customers. So we generally have a turnaround time of about 4 working days because our minimum standard is that customers need to be informed at least 2 business days before any outage. So internally, we have to make sure that we're meeting that timeline. For emergencies and unplanned outages, of course, factors outside of our control, we don't have the privilege of that timeline. However, we also still ensure that we have other standards in place. So in the event of an emergency, let's say there's a traffic accident that interrupts the service to a specific community, we are required to make sure that our internal teams, all persons who are responsible for any form of either response in terms of technical efforts or response to communicate to customers, they need to be informed within 15 minutes of any unplanned event. That then triggers a timeline for those who have to prepare the messaging and issue the messaging through whatever medium is required. Primarily, we utilize SMS. That's our initial point of mode of contact to customers. They get an automatic SMS if they are affected by an outage. Customers who utilize our mobile app also receive a notification. And these notifications are also posted directly to our website. We currently don't have an outage map, but we also have a Facebook group that we found to be very useful because it encourages or it enables customers to also have two-way communication with us. And it's one way of us making sure that we maintain engagement even in an emergency. It's not always about what you want to tell your customers. They may also have valuable information to share with you as well. So during emergencies, I mentioned it need to be timely. And timeliness doesn't always mean making sure you're meeting your own timelines or deadlines for the duration of time that passes between when you're aware and when you inform your customers. It's also about making sure you can manage their expectations. If a customer knows the cause of an outage and you're explaining to them what it will take to restore service, then they will have a better appreciation of the need for that amount of time. So it's also important that in our notifications, we're providing estimated restoration times. What is your projected restoration period for this outage? Also, if there's a portion of an area that has been restored, we update customers along the way as well. People may have moved from the area to go somewhere more comfortable. You want them to know that they have power. If the outage lasts longer than you expect, you also need to update them so that they're aware of how much longer they need to experience an outage. In the event of an emergency, for example, we face hurricanes or storms or flooding from time to time that results in outages. If we are restoring power in different areas, we need to make sure that customers are aware of when their turn will come. And also because we also have a prioritizing of our customers. We have critical entities that need to be restored first. For example, if a hospital is on a feeder that will be affected, that area is treated as priority. If a police station is on that feeder, they're also treated as a priority. And these are things that we inform our customers about so that they understand the logic behind the timing of their own restoration, and it helps to manage their expectation as well. They know that in the event of an emergency, where they would fall on that list, which is why it's also important to make sure that even in advance of an actual emergency, you're keeping your customers aware of your restoration plans. Don't wait until an actual emergency occurs. For example, in Belize at the start of the hurricane season, we would update our customers of our restoration plan. In the event of a storm or a hurricane or flood that might affect your service, these are the steps that we would typically take. We let them know upfront before there's any situation on hand, when they're more receptive and can receive the information in a calm way, give them a better understanding of what it takes to maintain service or restore service in the event of an emergency. And how do we know what works? How do we determine what channels to communicate to our customers through? This is based on analysis. We make sure that we are in sync with our customer preferences. When we receive updates from customers, when we do surveys, we are verifying what are the preferred mediums. That is what led us to create a Power Updates group on our Facebook page. BL's Facebook page currently has about 50,000 followers. And we found that for every time we posted an outage update on the homepage, it gave the misperception that there's always an outage when it might just be 50 customers affected. We decided to create a channel for that. And we made a group that customers can subscribe to. It's an open group. you go in there and you find anything relating to outages. You can even report an outage. You can share a photo of an event that may have caused an outage. And what it also does is help us to educate customers. Apart from just notifying them of an outage, our teams in the field would take photos of incidents that have resulted in outages. So if there is damage to our infrastructure from storms and trees have fallen and broken lines or poles, the teams would take photos of that and we share that in the Power Updates group. So apart from just understanding the cause of the outage, we're sharing visuals so that customers can appreciate it. And similarly, customers also use this group to share hazards. If there's something happening in your neighborhood that you believe is a hazard, if heavy equipment is in proximity to a power line and you think it may cause an outage or it may be a risk or a threat to someone's life, customers can share that as well. So it's one way that we found to effectively engage with our customers, have two-way communication with them on that group. It's been very beneficial both for them and us, because for us it's provided insight. Also, it kind of raises the ante for the expectation as well. They expect more immediate response, and what that means is that we have to make sure that we properly apply resources to these communication channels. So this is a joint venture between our corporate communications team and our customer services team. We have staff on rotation 24 hours monitoring the page and the group to make sure that we're highly responsive. And that's one of the benefits as well as one of the challenges, because in an outage, during an outage, there is more interaction happening on that page. So we need to apply more resources to monitor and respond in a timely manner. And we've also made sure that we put standards in place as well. The timing within which we need to provide responses to customers' messages or comments on the page or within the group. And of course, we utilize the other traditional channels as well: website, radio, television, newspaper. I mentioned those earlier. So I spoke about engaging them in our Facebook group, but we also utilize social media to educate customers. I mentioned earlier about explaining to customers what are the things that dictate our response during an emergency, how we prioritize restoration, how do we prepare for the seasons when there may be more incidents, such as the hurricane season. There may be flooding, there may be heavy winds. We don't wait until then or until the approach of those seasons. Year round, we educate our customers, explain to them just even the makeup of the system, the power system. When we say there's a broken insulator on a line, what does that look like? We also provide an opportunity for our teams to explain the nature of their work. So we have a Facebook Live show that we started at the beginning of the pandemic. When we found that more people were online, were utilizing social media more frequently, we decided to meet our audience where they were most frequent. So instead of using the television stations or the radio stations to be the only form of direct discussion with them outside of SMS or phone calls, we created our own show, one in which we educated them directly rather than going through a middleman. And we found that it's been very helpful. Depending on the topic, we may have a lot of people watching, or people refer to it later on and they use it to educate themselves. So we found that that's been very helpful with creating engagement opportunities for customers. The benefit of that, like I said, getting insight. While you may be opening up yourself for more comments, more negativity, more criticism, it also helps you to understand your audience. So while it might seem like chatter and complaints, it's actually helping you to determine, okay, what do we need to address? What do we need to improve? What are the educational messages that we are not doing enough of, or that we need to create now that people have directed us that these are the things that they don't understand? When we say we're faced with a specific technical issue, it's an opportunity to explain to the customer what's the purpose of that equipment on the power system. So communicating during emergencies or general engagement with customers becomes much more valuable when you're using the opportunity to educate them and also respond to the discussions. Sometimes it gets sticky, sometimes it gets rough, but it's better to have a response rather than to leave comments unanswered. And of course, that requires, like I said, adequate resources to man those pages. So in wrapping up, I just wanted to say that these techniques are the things that we use to make sure that at the end of the day, customers have confidence and trust in the brand. If you set a very high standard for yourself in terms of your timeliness of communication, making sure that you're transparent, even if it doesn't sound good, at least you're the one giving the information to your customer base so that they understand what you're faced with, um, rather than trying to figure it out themselves. So being prompt, being accurate, making sure that internally your teams are working in cohesion. Everybody understands what is our priority. The persons who are preparing the messages are in contact with the persons in the field. The persons in the field are sharing the images and providing the explanation. And these are things that have to be established in advance so you don't create those relationships in an emergency. You need to make sure that those are things you handle outside of these times when every minute counts. Be agile and adjust your tactics. In communication, you know that what works today may not work 2 years down the road. People have a different expectation. People are more receptive to innovative approaches. They're also more receptive to you meeting them where they are. If your consumers are no longer using Facebook but are on Instagram, you need to make sure that you're there as well, providing them with the same information or providing them with more information, more visuals that will help them understand. Also, apart from your internal relationships, one of the things that we found to be very effective in the event of emergency is utilizing your external stakeholders. For example, the media, other influential persons online who may have their own social media pages but are reliable sources of information. It's important to establish relationships with them in advance as well, because in an emergency, people are going to listen to who they trust. And in building the confidence and trust in your brand, you need to make sure that you have ambassadors, people who can repeat your messages in the event and repeat those messages accurately in the event that your audience is not necessarily on your specific channel at the time. So building relationships within and outside the company for the sake of communicating accurately is very critical. And finally, using your insight to routinely assess your effectiveness. We have protocols in place, we have timelines in place, but we have to make sure that we're checking how effective these measures are following every event, following every incident, following every emergency. It's important to do post-mortem with all teams who are involved. So that's from my perspective how I believe we have been able to manage our communication and maintain engagement while at the same time responding to our customer needs and making sure that we're proactive at the same time.
Well, thank you so much for that. It was really interesting to hear how you manage so many different channels for so many different audiences. I appreciate that detail. Well, now I'll turn it over to John for his take from Tucson Electric Power. Take it away, John.
All right. Thank you. And great job, Vonetta. Thanks for sharing everything about Belize. That was really informative. I'm going to talk about a few things for Tucson Electric Power. Let me just. And so TEP is located in Arizona. We are near the southern part of the state, but we also have, as part of our portfolio, Unisource Electric and Gas in northern and southern Arizona. But TEP has about 1 million people in the Tucson metro area, 422,000 customers, residential and commercial. We do have a variety of different weather situations in Arizona. Right now we're in storm season, so our outage time is really June through September. And we're fortunate we don't have a lot of hurricanes, tornadoes, any of the major weather issues, but we do have extreme heat in June and a lot of rain, lightning, high winds during the summer months. So what we've really learned from our customers and other research is that the top 3 customer preferred outage points are really, what is the ETR? When is my power going to be restored? What is the cause? And have work crews been dispatched? And those 3 critical areas we've scripted for our contact center reps. So when customers do call in, that they get accurate information. And based on some focus groups and other survey information that we've conducted, when the customers know what the cause is and also the size of the outage, they feel much more relieved in that, we're going to throw all our resources at it. So if it's an outage for 20 people, there's just a perception that, we will get to it when we have time. It's not that big of a deal. But if there's an outage for 5,000, 10,000, 20,000 customers, then customers are, have a perception that TEP will do everything possible. All crews will be on hand. So it's an interesting perception and just shows the value of doing that research. So like I said, other really critical points are number of customers impacted, acknowledging that their power is out, and also the time the outage began. So when a customer, if they do call into our contact center, we run through those 6 points of information very clearly, and the customers do have good recall with that, which really helps impact our customer satisfaction scores. We use JD Power for that, but we also have a separate outage survey. And one of the primary pieces of information that we use to inform our customers is our outage map. We launched this 10 years ago. And this is just an example. On the left side, you can see kind of a typical summer day, multiple outages. So that area was probably impacted by a monsoon storm, high winds, probably 40 to 50 miles an hour, excessive lightning. Tucson receives over 1 million lightning strikes a year. So that is something to contend with. But as you go to the outage map, if you were to click on one of those red boxes or that area that you live in, then what you'd see is on the right side on a mobile device, getting the information, again, the start time of the outage, number of customers impacted, number of customers that are restored, just to show that there's some progress, and the ETRs listed for expected time of restoration. So we really try to educate our customers and make them aware of the outage map. And do a lot of pre-summer communications in our newsletter. We also sponsor a session on one of the local TV shows for the 5 o'clock news in the weather segment. So again, just trying to keep our resources in front of the customers, remind them of the summer storm season. And, if we can drive customers to the outage map, that reduces a call to the contact center. And what we've seen in some other research, and this information is from Chartwell on the left side, so this is more industry-wide, but customers really prefer push messages, so the text, EMS or SMS and email. Those are the primary opportunities and really resonate with customers. We are integrating that in our system today. Right now, it's more of a manual process. So we're as we upgrade our smart meters and OMS systems, we'll be able to proactively push out more alerts in a more timely manner. But right now we use those just based on the size of an outage. The other key points for customers is getting a robocall that you may be experiencing an outage, getting a push notification on the mobile app. We really try to do everything to get the word out so our customers don't have to call in. If a customer does call in to report an outage, they do get an automatic callback when power is restored. So you can see the outage map does get a lot of traction at 28%, but we probably exceed that just because of our education and outreach efforts. One key point on the outage map and other notifications is customers really only want 1 or 2 updates regarding the ETR. So if they're made aware of an outage, go to the outage map. Let's say the cause is investigating, or in a storm season, that outage can also become a larger outage depending on the weather. So really no more than 2 ETR updates is what the customers prefer. You can see their satisfaction and interest in that really declines if you do 3 or 4 updates. And that just creates a lot of uncertainty, which creates stress and may drive more call volume to your reps. So with our voice of the customer and research, I said, we do a lot of outage surveys. We started that last year. We have regular outage surveys going out, really trying to collect as much information from our customers and find out where can we improve? What can we do better? Make sure that we're always meeting or exceeding our customer expectations. One other thing to look at, though, we use our surveys, but also looking at the sentiment. And again, this is from some research from Chartwell. But what feedback does your utility seek from customers after outages? And you want to look at some of the sentiment. So if you go to your social media channels, and what are customers talking about regarding an outage? And here, the blue sky outages are in the gray shaded area. The major events such as a storm, hurricane, tornado, other major issues are in the dark blue. So sentiment can vary, based on the cause. And ETRs are really critical to make sure those are accurate. The duration, we see a lot of research on customer satisfaction that, if we say the power will be restored in 2 hours, that, if we hit that mark, there's great satisfaction. If we come in a little bit early, 10, 20 minutes early, that's exceptional. But if you miss that ETR by 10, 20, 30 minutes, or do another outage ETR update, that really aggravates the customer and creates a great deal of dissatisfaction and lowers those scores. So just how important it is to focus on an accurate ETR and keep customers updated during an outage. And again, our outages in the Tucson area, June is primarily heat related, just because of the excessive temperatures. Our storm season is July, August, September. The other eight months of the year, we're pretty lucky in that we have decent weather. Obviously, there can be a vehicle accident or equipment failure, but really try to notify our customers on all outages. But when we look at our J.D. Power customer satisfaction scores and the feedback that we get from focus groups and our internal outage survey, there's some areas that we recognize that could really improve our customer experience. And so we've taken a lot of efforts in the last year or two, conducting journey mapping, looking at current state and future state outage process. What do we do for a planned outage? And then what do we do in a major emergency? Looking at some of those different customer types on the journey mapping. So from a residential perspective or, a business perspective. And there's obviously different expectations for those commercial customers. And then, one of the items that came out in the journey mapping during COVID was just, how do we promote safety and, more safety in our community? So if there was an outage in downtown or near the university, what are some other things to consider? Just the sensitivity as things have changed the last 2 years. There's also much more heightened awareness when everyone was working from home or going to school from home. So much more sensitive to any power interruptions or outages. So the journey mapping really brought our cross-functional teams together, more of an education and a wider lens at looking at an outage. So that was really helpful. One other element, coming out of that and some other research that we've seen was really doing the extensive pre-emergency planning. So perhaps looking at it from a substation view or circuit view. And, like I said, we have a University of Arizona's in Tucson. We have major hospitals. We have some other, very large industrial accounts. So if an outage were to happen, it's almost like creating a, strategic playbook. Everybody knows, who, what, when, where, how to address that situation. If it's a prolonged outage, we would be offering ice and battery chargers and other community resources. So where would we place those in that geographic region? So the pre-emergency planning is something we're moving into. As I mentioned, the proactive communications, we're building out our platform for automated, text and email. One thing we're working on this summer is just the customer-friendly messaging. Sometimes putting some of our utility speak or terminology on an outage map doesn't mean anything to the customer. Is there a better way to phrase an equipment failure, or if there's a raptor, one of our eagles or something causing an outage? What's the best way to communicate that? And then, also kind of wrapped into that pre-emergency planning, looking at our customer database and identifying customers that have a medical or safety alert. So if a customer's on oxygen or has any other special medical needs, making sure that we contact those customers, follow through, keep them updated, and give them the most accurate information for them to navigate an outage, especially if it's a prolonged outage. So really taking a wide look and thinking of all the different variables and expectations and different customer types, and making sure that we're addressing all of their needs and meeting their expectations. And an outage is a negative event, but it's also a great opportunity for the utility to shine. It's to show our customers how great we perform when there's an issue. So that can really move the needle on customer satisfaction.
Well, thank you, Jen. I found your insights around preferred channels, frequency, and messaging all really, really helpful. You guys are clearly doing a ton of work over at TEP.
Thanks.
Well, I know I'm eager to jump into our fireside chat. I've got lots of questions for you guys. Want to send a reminder to our audience that they can also submit questions. So if you wanted to hear anything deeper about what Vonetta and John discussed, or have any general questions, please feel free to put them in there. I'm going to start everything with a poll question. So I'm going to ask both Vonetta and John this question, but also I want our attendees to answer as well. So let me launch our first poll question. And what I would like to hear is, what do you think the most important parts of an emergency strategy are? There's lots of important parts, but we're hoping to point down to just one. Email campaigns set up in advance, clear, precise messaging, consistency, timeliness, or monitoring social media. And while we wait for some of those responses to come in, Vonetta, would you like to start with your thoughts on this question?
Yeah, I'd say almost all of those are important components. They all have a role to play. Campaigns set up in advance can help with what John mentioned earlier about safety. In the event of an emergency, you might not be thinking about safety, so being prepared in advance will help. Also, clear, precise messaging is critical. That's not an area that you want to take too many risks in. People have too many things on their mind in an emergency, so you want to make sure that you are specific, clear, easy to understand, and consistency. If people are looking out for updates every 15 minutes, make sure you stick to that timeline, and that links to timeliness as well. Managing their expectation, they know what to expect from you during that time. And of course, social media, where the discussions are happening, you might learn something from that, or you might be guided to adjust your messaging in a certain way.
Great. I think the audience agrees with you. When I look at the poll answers, which again, you guys can access up in the upper right-hand corner, we can see that 64% of the audience said that clear, precise messaging was the most important, followed by timeliness, which are two things that you mentioned as being absolutely critical. John, would you add anything to that or suggest that anything else is your top priority?
I think those are all key points. I think as much as you can be proactive, so if you can get that text or email push or mobile app push of you may be experiencing an outage, just showing that you're aware of the situation before the customers have to call in. Customer satisfaction drops significantly when a customer has to contact the utility regarding an outage. And the clear messaging, like I said earlier in my slide, I had those 6 key points, and we script that into a conversation for the CSRs. So when a customer does call in, the customer gets that confidence of we're aware of your outage, we have crews responding, X number of people are affected, the cause is, the ETR is, and then drive them back to the map. So giving them, really digestible points of information so they can navigate the outage. But, it has to be accurate, it has to be timely.
Wonderful. Yeah, there's some key things that you just absolutely have to have within emergency communications. I think each of you hit a little bit on social media, but I'm curious to hear whether you're trying any new social channels. Like, have you ever tried any emergency communications on TikTok? And if not, how do you handle when people send in responses? Do you have a clear process? Who do you get involved with that at your utility? Vonetta, why don't we start with you?
Well, primarily, it's handled as a team. Straightforward queries, information that you already know, it's easy to respond to. But if somebody is seeking clarification, if somebody is saying, well, they don't understand why your estimated restoration time is 2 hours when they're looking at it and it's not, doesn't look like 2 hours work, that's where you would lean on the technical experts to make sure that you're able to explain the nature of the work that's needed. Yes, it might be time consuming, but that's what makes a difference in terms of customers appreciating your effort to educate them. I think education goes a long way, even in an emergency, because should that situation happen again, they would know what to expect, or they would be able to pinpoint the estimated time. So that's one example.
Great.
Yeah. And for our social media, we have a process that'll notify our team in corporate communications. And then we have some parameters built around the outage. Obviously, if there's an outage for 10 people, we may not post that on social media just because it's, 10 out of 422,000 accounts. So we do have some numbers on size of outage, but also on the duration. So if it is a major storm, if we have 20 poles down and a lot of wire, we're going to post that on social media and provide updates. We also, once we post things on social media, we do have staff that are monitoring that and replying to customers. And, again, it might be helpful of, if we have some photos from the field or, reminding customers to use the outage map for updates. So we really try to use it as a channel to communicate with our customers. I know we've also looked at some other social channels that are more neighborhood or homeowner related. And I just can't think of the name of those right now, but also reaching out. Excuse me?
I think Nextdoor is the one that I.
Yes. Yeah, I knew one had door and I just couldn't remember the first part. So, trying to, if we see it's impacted a certain area, making sure we can push a notification out or reach those customers. So it is a valuable channel. Obviously, the research says, a lot of people prefer text or email, but using all different channels for all different situations. And then it's obviously very different when we handle our commercial or managed accounts. So if we had a hospital or the university or a large manufacturer, we're going to have a one-to-one relationship and call out and contact our key contacts at those facilities.
Yeah, that's important, having that one-to-one communication with your commercial customers, since when they are so large, it's such an impact on their business. We have a question from our audience here. What communication is used when you do not have a cause for the outage? Would either of you want to take that question?
think for TEP, we're trying to determine the cause. So the first point of information would be investigating, and hopefully, we don't want to use the investigating, for the entire, let's say, 2-hour outage. But as we're trying to figure out what that is, we'll just label it in a more generic term as just under investigation or investigating, and use that on the outage map, and then make an update to what the actual cause is. And for us, that's typically storm weather related or vehicle accident.
Yeah. To add to what John said, also to humanize it, when there's a problem that needs to be identified, you want to remind your customers that there are people involved. So in addition to using a generic response to say we're investigating, we would say we'll also include that our teams are in the area, or our teams have been dispatched, something to remind them that this involves people as well. Kind of, play on the human aspect of the investigation, so it doesn't just seem like, okay, you're giving them a blanket response. There are people out there trying their best, or they're working together, something to that effect. Bring back the human aspect into it when you don't have a solid response or solid solution identified.
That's really important. No one wants to feel like a number, that they're being treated like a number when they're in a situation like an outage. So humanizing is super important. I'd like to ask, what part of your outage communication strategy do you feel has been the most effective as you continue to add different layers and elements? Is there one part that just stands out to you?
I'd say allowing customers to respond. So anything that enables engagement is very valuable. Like I said, even if they're upset, it's better to hear from them directly than them using another platform to talk about you. Receive it directly, and you can maybe change that relationship or change that experience, for the customer. When they see that, you're paying attention. It's how you respond to it as well. Providing the opportunity to engage, but also making sure that you're ready to respond at the same time.
And I think tying into that, as I mentioned earlier, an outage is an opportunity for your utility to really shine and exceed customer expectations. So when you can build that into the culture and get that across the different business units, that, hey, this is our time to really make a difference and show our customers how good we are. As most people take the utility for granted. The power's always on, everything always works. When there's an outage, yeah, there's a problem, but here's an opportunity to really show how good you are. And I think for us, really looking at our CSAT numbers and working, cross-functionally across the different business units, doing the journey mapping, having some shared officer goals has really unified our staff across the company, and getting that vision to, let's go out and win the customer and make a difference and get this back on and make the customers happy has really been a benefit.
Yeah, you're right. The good customer experiences stand out in memory, so it's important to do that right. I'd like to ask our audience another question. You both have mentioned a wide range of tools that you use to communicate, and so I want to ask our audience, what channels do they currently use? Please check this time all of the ones that apply. So I'll pull that up there. While we're waiting for those responses, I'd like to hear from Vonetta and John. Are there any tools that you use that aren't listed? For example, Vonetta, I heard you mention media relations as a major tool for outage. Would you add anything else to this list?
Let me see the list. Okay, yeah, I would say even brand ambassadors.
Great point. And yes, let me read that out loud for those who can't see it. Social media, text alerts, voice messages, outage maps, wireless alerts, email, and your utility website. So you would add media relations and ambassadors. John, do you have any other tools that you use?
I think it ties into the media relations side. We do sponsor one of the local news channels, weather, during the summer. So again, just reminding them of the outage map, that TEP's prepared. I think, for us, we have a very specific outage period, the summer months. So using our newsletter and website to remind our customers that we're ready for the outages. We've got extra cable, we've got line crews ready, we're 24/7. That we're here. If there's a problem, we're going to fix it as soon as we can. So just reassuring our customers that nothing to worry about.
Wonderful. And as I look at the responses that people have shared, which again you guys can access over in the right-hand corner, social media tops the list, followed by text alerts and your utility website. So a lot of digital channels are still on the top there. Awesome. Well, I've got some more questions for you guys. And again, if the audience, you have anything else that you'd like to hear. All right, we've got another question in here. Being in post-COVID times and having to have adopted different and new ways of communicating with customers during the pandemic, are there any strategies that you have adopted permanently since the pandemic? What are some that you had to adopt that you did not use pre-COVID? It's a great question.
Yeah, and I think for us, during COVID, we had to, worry about, we can't have two staff in the same trucks. We had to have separate vehicles, or some of the spacing, or repairing an outage. If we have to go underground and it's a confined space, instead of getting an entire crew down there, it's going to be one person. So there were some adjustments made to the ETRs, and it's going to take a little longer because we have to work safely in a different manner. So that was one thing that we had to adjust to during COVID. But I think as we looked at our research and worked on outage-related issues to improve our customer experience, through the journey mapping, we did a scenario where we used a downtown restaurant that also had a bar and a hotel, and it had really about 7 different business operations under one account. So because of some of the safety issues and concerns, it made us think of an outage differently. So, for example, during the current state outage, the police or fire might be notified at some point that there's an outage. Well, that was good enough pre-COVID or things have obviously changed the last couple of years in a lot of our communities. But on the future state journey map, there's more of a realization of, hey, if the power goes out downtown and it's dark and everybody's at the bars and restaurants and the university's in session and it's dark, it's very unsafe. So maybe we should make sure we reach out to public safety, or maybe we should bring out portable lights, or do things differently. So I think being able to see pre-COVID and post-COVID, and some of the having a heightened sensitivity to the overall safety and community safety made us look at the outages differently. And then one point of that, we also, if we have a prolonged outage, we'll bring out ice and battery chargers and set up a community resource center. But that, the types of things that we would have available to our customers in that outage center also changed. So moving beyond just ice and battery chargers. So just thought gave us an opportunity to think of an outage differently and to really focus on the customer experience and create a better, safer experience.
Yeah, a lot of positive additions there. That's great. Vonetta, would you add anything?
I would just say revisiting the profile of communities. Whereas before COVID, we knew what outages would affect what sectors, because if it's during working hours, business hours, we knew the commercial sectors would be impacted. But now everybody's at home during the pandemic. It changed the way in which we planned outages and also how we communicated. For the business sector, we would do direct communication, but now we needed to add things like schools on the list. Mm-hmm. Because they're doing online classes, they don't have all their children at the same location. And so those residences would be affected. Whereas if the school was having an outage or was in an area that would have had an outage, we knew that everybody would have been there. So just understanding the need to update the profile of communities to know who are the customers that are impacted at any given time, since lifestyles had changed. And even up to now, not everybody has reverted to pre-pandemic modes. So it's just to constantly assess, make sure that that is updated information as well. Even in the customer account database, those types of things are updated.
Great, lots of takeaways. We've talked a lot about the positive things that you guys are doing and all the progress you've made, but are there any areas that you think still needs work within your communications for outages? What's your biggest challenge in this coming year?
I think timeliness, the time it takes for works to be completed, like some of the restrictions that John mentioned earlier, having crews that have to work within different arrangements, whereas you may have had 5 or 6 team members on a job that could be working in proximity. During the pandemic and after, some of those types of work structures had to change. So that impacted the time it took for power to be restored because of adjusted work modes. Similarly, transportation in vehicles. You could have a team of 4 traveling to a site in one vehicle. Now you need to split that team up in 2 or 3 to get there. So that would be the first thing that comes to mind for me.
And I think for us, it's just the continued opportunities to refine and exceed our customer expectations. So we've been really focused on the outage communication last year, this year. As we roll out, we're not 100% smart meter in our territory. We're getting very close. So once that is 100%, then integrating a lot more of those push notifications on the email and text. So currently looking at ways to improve our customer data, making sure that, anytime that we have interactions with our customers, just to verify this is your correct phone number, this is your correct email address, so that we can use those in the future. And, I think the one item that we're looking at going forward is, creating more of those pre-emergency planning, having an overall strategy based on a substation or circuits, just knowing, having a playbook so that we can execute and really exceed our customer expectations.
Wonderful. I'll close with one last question. John, you reminded me with your comment. I'm curious to know, what have you guys found to be the most successful ways to update customer contact information and preferences? What have you done to accomplish that?
Well, I think right now we're trying to think of a campaign to do that. If you went into the website, there would be a web banner, or when you went into my account, just having that verification. So right now it's more on the one-to-one. Anytime a customer contacts the contact center regarding a question, anytime we have an opportunity to talk with them, to make sure that we update, is this information still correct? Would you like to add anyone as an emergency contact? Making sure that that's all verifiable. On our key accounts and mid-size accounts, we do have account managers. So again, making sure all their data is accurate. But we are looking at some type of campaign to really encourage customers to make sure that we have their correct information. And we're going through a contact center modernization project. So as part of that, in the near future, then we would have a customer portal, and customers could select the communications and the channel preferences and make sure everything's accurate. So it's just, we're in the early phase, but that's really the focus of where we're going down the road.
Wonderful. Well, we are unfortunately out of time today. I can't believe it's already been an hour. If we missed addressing any of your questions, please feel free to follow up with us. We'll answer any questions also over email. What a great session. Thank you, John and Vonetta, for your insights and advice around emergency communications. I know I have a lot of takeaways. I'm sure our audience does as well, as we all continue to refine our emergency alerts. And thank you to our audience, too, for attending and asking so many great questions. As a reminder, we'll be following up and sharing the presentation materials along with the playback link and recording of today's webinar. And our next webinar will be on September 22nd, and it will hit on strategies for high bill communications, another very important topic. Well, thank you again, everybody, and I will close it here. Have a great day. Thank you so much.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks.